Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to episode 6 of The W.O.W Show. I cannot believe that we're on the 6th episode already, but as they say, time flies when you're having fun. If you're new here, I'm your host, Vernaire, and I'm just want to say welcome, welcome, welcome to The W.O.W Show, where we celebrate the strength, resilience, and achievements of women throughout the West Indies. I feel so blessed to be able to spend my Sunday afternoons with you and getting to know all these fabulous and phenomenal women of the West Indies. Last Sunday, I sat down with the fantastic Anguillian political powerhouse, Mistress Quincy Gums Marie. And today we are back in Anguilla to catch up with the holistic life coach, business strategist, public speaker, and purpose troubleshooter, the one, the only, Mistress Avern Richardson. Good afternoon, Avern, and how are you?
Good afternoon, Vernaire. That was fantastic. Oh, wow.
So how are things with you over there in the ATL?
Things are splendid. Thank you very much. It's summer. Things are heating up. I'm thinking just like the Caribbean. I'm sure the Caribbean is already like miles ahead of us, but things are definitely heating up, but they're good.
Awesome. So yes, guys, grab your favorite drink, settle into a nice and comfy seat, and join us for another fabulous conversation filled with inspiration, empowerment, sisterhood. You are officially listening to The W.O.W Show. So yes, guys, you are back with me, your host, Vernaire, and today we are unveiling the herstory of Mistress Avern Richardson. I just wanted to let you guys know that this is actually a pre-recorded interview. This interview has been recorded on the 8th of May because Miss Avern Richardson has something fantastic to do today on her official day for her interview. But Avern, you currently reside in Atlanta. But as a WOW woman that was born in Anguilla, could you share one thing about your beautiful island that you miss the most when you're in the ATL?
I think we can all answer this question. You missed the beach, girl. You missed the beach.
Okay.
Everybody that knew me knew that on Sundays, it's Sunday Fun Day. And if you're looking for me, you will not find me at home on a Sunday afternoon, but you will definitely find me on one of our 33 beaches having an amazing time, not tanning under an umbrella, okay? Not tanning. But definitely just laying in the silence and listening to the waves crash on the ocean, on the sand, and just having a real nice, relaxed time. Like I really miss the water. Now I try to like go to like the lake and the rivers and the streams and stuff like that, but it ain't nothing like being able to just dive in and feel the salt on your face and I was thinking about making like a little sea in my bathtub upstairs. I was like, let me see. Maybe if I do that, it would give me some nostalgia. But that's definitely one thing that I miss.
I have to say that lakes and rivers and streams does not sound as exotic as going through a nice
It
white sand
doesn't.
beach in Anguilla, right?
Not at all. Not when you see the snakes going downstream with the river. No, not at all. Not at all.
Wow. So, right, before we jump into discussing your phenomenal life and the woman that you are today, can we take things a little bit back to your childhood for a moment? So, obviously, you were born and raised in Anguilla, but did you grow up with both of your parents or were you raised in a single parent family?
So I was raised in a both mom and dad situation
Nice.
as a young child. I don't remember if it was like up until age five, probably. But then my parents had a divorce, and I was raised in a single parent household with my mom. That was definitely quite a transition because, it's like for some of your life, you grew up knowing that you were with two parents, and then some of your life you woke up and you're like, okay, what's going on? Like I thought that this was a thing. And so navigating that as a young child, and I would say as a very intelligent young child, because I walked at 6 months. I actually was, asking very mature questions from a young age that kids probably shouldn't be even aware of. Started playing tennis at 3 years old. So like I was a very early thinker, I would say. And I often found having conversations with my mom, and she was like, "You're not old enough yet to talk about that," or, "When you're ready, I'll have that conversation with you." But I was always a critical thinker, very observant, and definitely noticing that shift. I knew that something wasn't right. So, yeah, it was quite the transition.
So who would you say that you, obviously starting off your early childhood with both of your parents, who would you say that you're the most like, your mom or your dad?
That's a very hard thing to distinguish because it depends on, what type of um, activity I'm doing. I think that my mom, she's a very great planner. And I think that my dad, he's a very level-headed person, and he troubleshoots things and he fixes problems. He was a jack of all trades. Like he could tile, he can build stuff, he can do whatever problem arose. And so even like seeing that, I think that inspired me to kind of just kind of get good at everything that I did too. So I can't really put a finger on that one. I think I see myself in both of them, just manifesting in different things.
It's so interesting because you seem like maybe the perfect blend of the two, because you use a lot of words to describe them as I would use to describe you in the short time that I've known you, especially using the word troubleshooter for many reasons, because you are the troubleshooter for so many. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you picked up that trait from your dad. And then
Yeah.
just the ability to be able to just, do anything that you put your mind to. And then obviously being someone who is a business strategist and an operationalizer. It's a
Mhm.
planning element from your mum as well. So I think it's
Yeah,
a fantastic blend of the two. So
for
speaking
sure.
of so speaking of your mum, Mrs. Avanella Griffith, she
Yeah.
was a former teacher who actually began teaching at 16.
Yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned earlier that you were always a very intelligent child. But did you feel any pressure to excel academically when you were growing up because your mom was a teacher?
I can't really tell. I can't really remember a time where like it was pointed out at like, oh, your mom is a teacher, you need to do this or you need to do that. And I think like because I was so aware from a young age, I already knew how I should be leading. Like I began to develop leadership skills at a very early age, taking responsibility, taking accountability, just a spirit of excellence. And those are also traits that I got from both my mom and my dad. And so I don't think I ever had that feeling of like, expectation or pressure of performance because it came naturally to me. And I guess it was almost like the expectation. So, I think in some essences, I can't say that I don't remember like my parents congratulating me on like good grades and stuff like that. But I think that it was kind of like the norm or the expectation, to kind of like say the least.
So you have a brother as well. Are you the first child in your family?
I am. I am the oldest child. My brother Carmel Gums. He is an artist, a visual artist. So he does painting and drawing and all of that great stuff. And he's really
Fantastic.
cool. Yeah.
Awesome. So sticking with the topic of your mom and her education, when you were 12, your brother and yourself, you moved to the UK, whilst your mom pursued a master's in leadership and development.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously that was a major transition for you at the age of 12. But could you share your experience of transitioning from obviously the beaches in Anguilla to gloomy UK? I'm sorry to all the listeners who are out there listening from the UK. I live there too, I understand, but
Yeah.
the weather in the UK
It's totally different. It's
it
not for
has
the
a mind of its own, right? So how did you deal with that transition outside of the weather from Anguilla to the UK at such a young age?
I think that the great thing for me is that I was well traveled. I have traveled throughout the Caribbean. I have traveled outside of the Caribbean internationally. I'm used to. I guess I was used to being introduced to new sceneries, and I believe that while it was still hard to make like a transition of like, oh, the weather or the traffic or the distance or the food, and all that type of stuff. Fun fact, I was bullied in school. One girl, she tried to light my hair
Hold
on
on.
fire.
Did you say fun fact?
Yeah, fun fact. Fun fact.
Why is that a fun fact?
Because I think it's just outrageously insane that, I think I don't know. It's fun fact, I guess. I've
So
forgiven
let's
her.
elaborate on that. So was that in the UK?
Yeah, it was in the UK when I moved to the UK. Um, I think that it was the first time that I was ever like bullied in that way, like a intentional, mean, like outgoing way, where she even like tried to light my hair on fire in one
Oh my
class.
God.
It was crazy. Um, but it was interesting. I went to all girls school. That was new. That was
So
interesting.
sorry to cut you. Which part of England did you live?
I
Because
lived in
obviously
Birmingham.
in Birmingham.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I lived in Birmingham, and okay. So I think that I done moved on to your question, but to go back and
No,
answer
no,
the
no, no, no. That's
part.
absolutely fine. So please
Okay,
continue. We need
so
to talk about this bullying aspect because I think that there's a lot of people who will probably learn something from this moment as well. And you obviously seem like you overcame it because you call it a fun fact. But
it was it
please
was
elaborate.
yeah. So moving to the UK, everything for me was great. I was fine. I adapted well. I was used to change, so it didn't throw me off guard. But when it came to like school and again taking up that leadership role, my brother, he was also with me, so I would walk him. This is the first time that now instead of my mom dropping us off to school, now I'm walking to take him to school, because one thing that I forgot to mention is that my mom didn't live where we stayed, and we'll get to that later on. But moving into school, all girls school, it was quite the transition. You're around a lot of females, emotions, drama, like just the craziness. And I remembered when I came, like everybody kind of like flocked me, right? Because I'm the new girl. I had like this big curly hair, and everybody was like so intrigued by the hair and stuff like that. And the girl who didn't have so much like for me, all her attention was gone now. And
Okay.
so that's how I became the target. It's like,
Okay.
you
And the thing is though, that is so common with girls' schools because I remember when I was in the UK as well, there was the Walthamstow Girls' School, and they were known for being like extremely catty. So yeah, I think it's a girls' school thing. But then, what was the end result of that? Did you guys ever become friends? Did she stop bullying you? What happened?
No, we never became friends. I believe that after so many times of going to detention, I believe that she either got expelled or like transitioned to another school.
Oh wow!
Um, but yeah,
So
it was.
how long were you in the UK for?
I was in the UK just over a year. Yeah,
Okay.
so it was a quite an interesting transition. But I think in all of that, the leadership skills that I developed from a young child, like just taking ownership and, rising to the occasion with everything that I kind of saw and experienced, through the divorce and through just having to take more responsibility at home and supporting my mom and stuff like that. Even supporting her in this way, it was like she trusted me to raise my brother.
Mhm.
Of course, we had an adult, but we'll get to that.
Yes, let's touch on that though, because obviously I'm Munstration. For those of you who are tuned in and you don't know, I'm actually based in Munster at the moment, returned here in 2019. If you want to learn a little bit about my story, please do go and check out episode 1, which is on 664 Connect Media's YouTube channel. You hear all the goss, and interestingly, Avern was the person interviewing me. So now I'm turning the table back on her. But yes, while you were in the UK, you lived with a menstruation nanny for a year and a half.
Yeah.
as your mom resided 3 hours away from you. So you mentioned that obviously you were raising your brother.
Yeah.
So how did you adjust to this new living situation? One, you're in a foreign country. Your parents have already split up, which is something that you've already been through. And then, did you know your nanny before moving to the UK, or was that something that was also thrust upon you as well?
Yeah, so she was actually my nanny from a baby. So
Okay,
when the volcano had erupted, I believe it was
95.
1995,
Mm-hmm.
they migrated to Anguilla. And then they were a part of our church and stuff like that. And she actually started like a babysitting. I don't know if it was a business or it was just something that she did, but there was me, and then I saw that there were other kids, and then it started to grow and stuff like that. And so I remember her even telling me that as I grew, I then became like her helper with the other kids. And so even in that regard, like I've always seen how I've taken up leadership roles, and how while some people had the opportunity to be more of a child, I think I found either joy or responsibility in having to rise to the occasion, or having to, you know, just be a little bit more grown than everybody else. I don't know. So she was from Munstrat, and then as we got older, we would still like go and see her, visit her, and stuff like that. And then when my mom was moving to the UK, well, not moving, but going to school to get her master's in leadership education development, we were supposed to actually go with her, and she was in Bristol, right? So she got a scholarship with the government to go to the University of Bristol, and Bristol was a very expensive city. So we were trying to find like an apartment that could have like all of us, but everything was just like outrageously expensive to have a space for the three of us, me, my brother, and my mom. And so I believe that she ended up being able to get a space on campus, but of course she couldn't have us with her. And it wasn't her intention to just drop us off at somebody's door or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But a strategic encounter was that a couple years before that, our nanny from Angola actually moved to Birmingham. And
Okay.
so it was almost like, God just provided that way that we weren't living with a stranger. We weren't living with someone that we didn't know. And she was also living by herself, and she was disabled. So in a way, that was another thing for me to take on in terms of leadership role. And just like, although she did help herself most of the time, like, I still like when we were walking, going to the market, going to places, like she walks with a walker. So it was like, yeah, she's the adult, but I still had to make sure that everything was good, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's another level of leadership and responsibility. So it's like it's almost like along the way, I wouldn't say, like you mentioned that the volcano took away your innocence as a child. I would say as a way, for a long time I felt like that, like the events that I kind of faced in life, it robbed me of my ability to just be a child and not have to worry. But in the end, I realized that instead of being a victim, all things work together for the good of those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. And I believe that the purpose and the mandate that God has for me is one that, there might not be a lot of people who can endure, and not just endure, but conquer, and really like show the battle scars, and then go back and reach back and pull others forward as well. I just believe that that's just the mantle that he has given me. And while it would have been nice to be able to just live in la la land for a while, and grow up like a lot of regular kids, I'm grateful that God chose me to bear this cross. So yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when I spoke to you, during our pre-interview conversation, I remember you really saying that you're a person of integrity, and you truly believe that you shouldn't be teaching people about things that you don't know or you haven't experienced. And unfortunately, sometimes in order for us to help people through the fire, we have to walk through the fire ourselves, right? So not to say that, we wish bad luck or bad experiences on anyone, but sometimes you really don't know until you know, right? So you can't help somebody else unless you were able to some way help yourself. So I'm so proud of you, hearing this part of your story and knowing everything that you've been through. So thank you so much for sharing. But guys, I'm going to take a little break and we'll be right back. So, guys, if you're just tuning in now, you are tuned in to the WOW Show live on 664 Connect Media and Radio Anguilla with yours truly, Vernaire Bass. This afternoon, I am so privileged to be sitting down with the fabulous WOW woman, Mistress Avern Richardson, who has been telling us all about her childhood from growing up in Anguilla to transitioning to living in the UK for about a year and a half, being bullied, the works. Guys, it's been an emotional story so far, but there's still more to come. So, Avern, you mentioned at the top of the conversation that you walked at 6 months and then you started to play tennis at the age of 3. Upon returning to Anguilla from the UK, I don't know how this happened, but for some reason, you decided to take it upon yourself that you're going to now pursue tennis professionally. Were you playing tennis when you were in the UK as well?
So funny story. No, I was not. I started playing tennis because my mom was actually a very prominent tennis player on the island. And the story behind how I started was that our founder of our tennis academy, Mr. Mitch Lake, who I give so much honor and credit to for where I am today with the opportunities that tennis has opened up for me, she introduced me to the sport by taking me to a tennis camp. I believe it was either the third one. I think it was 1999. Yeah, I would have been 3 then, so 1999. And she took me and she was like, I want to let her try and test it out. And they were like, well, we're only taking like 5-year-olds. And I was 3. And she's like, well, if it doesn't work, then, we just won't bring her back or whatever. And let's just say at the end of the day, I finished the entire summer camp and I was awarded the most disciplined Pee-wee. And Pee-wees were 5 and up. So at 3 years old, I got the award for the most disciplined. I should have been 5, but I was 3, basically.
Would you even know about discipline at 3? At 3, you're just running around like, well, that's not, so maybe not Avern Richardson, but the average 3-year-old is just wild and running around the place, trying to figure out what everything is. But as you said, like, you were very observant, you're walking at 6 months, so you were clearly ahead of your time, right?
Yeah.
Which speaks a lot to the next thing that we're going to be discussing, because not only did you come back from the UK and decide that you were going to pursue the sport professionally, but you somehow built up the courage to reach out to the education department of Anguilla to tell them that you would like to play tennis professionally. So you don't want to go to school like everybody else. You want to create your own school program, which also meant that you were going to school for 7 days a week. Where did you get the audacity from to do such a thing at 12?
So when I was in the UK, I, of course, was exposed to a lot of other sports like gymnastics. Well, not just sports, but extracurricular activities. So like theater, gymnastics, dance, cooking, like all this stuff. And I was like, oh, I want to go to school like and do gymnastics. But I knew that Anguilla didn't have that. And I knew I was going back home. So at one point, I did want to stay in the UK. But then, I'm like, okay, I got to go back home. And so at this point, I knew that I was going to graduate at 16. And I didn't have a lot of time to figure out what I was going to do when I got back home. And I don't remember the exact moment of when tennis came back on the radar because I couldn't afford to keep up playing tennis because tennis is, you got to pay for tennis and tennis is a little bit more expensive than the other sports. And so I stopped playing for a long time. But when I came back home, I was like, okay, what are the opportunities here? Like, what's next for me? Like, I don't have anything on the people who choose to do whatever jobs they choose to do. But I knew based upon the way that I was growing up and thinking and dreaming and stuff, I was like, I have big dreams. I have big hopes. I know I got a big plan for my life. So how am I going to do that? Because, at this point, my dad wasn't really much in my life. My mom is not like she had a whole lot of money. And so I'm like, how do I even go to college? Like, can I even afford to go to college? And seeing my mom go to school, that was a thought like, okay, I need to go to college. I need to get a degree. And I don't remember what happened, but I think that I had an encounter with somebody. And I think between that encounter with them and watching Serena Williams on TV and her going to the Olympics, I was like, oh, one day I want to go to the Olympics and I'm going to represent Anguilla and I'm going to play tennis and all of this stuff. And so I remember being a planner from young as well. And I asked myself, like, okay, what are the steps that I need to take to get to the Olympics? Well, first of all, I got to start playing. So like, first of all, I got to find a way to like afford to play tennis. And then I was like, all right, so then what's the next step? And I knew I still had to get an education. And one of the great things that Mr. Lake provided and still provides today through the Anguilla Tennis Academy is helping us to pave the way for tennis scholarships to the US. And so, to like help us with creating our pitches and our promo videos and really like asking for these scholarships and partnering with other clubs like the T-Bar and Racket Club in Dallas, Texas. And so I remembered going to him and telling him that I want to go to school on a tennis scholarship. But prior to me, I believe that there were at least 3 people who had gotten scholarships and stuff before. And so it wasn't like it was just a mystical thing that I just pulled out the air. So I got wind of like, oh, this was done before, so maybe why not me, right? And I remember expressing to him, and he was such a great support and driving force to believing in me, seeing what I have done when I was younger, like just my attitude, my demeanor, of course, knowing my mom and, everything that we've kind of been going through and stuff like that. And he helped me to get sponsors to pay for my tennis lessons. Nice. And so I had sponsors who paid for my tennis lessons and allowed me to play tennis. And in that, I was like, all right, I want to go to school. So how do we do this? At the time, I think I was probably only playing like twice a week for like an hour every day. And he was like, well, we got to get you playing more hours. And so after that, I started playing for 2 hours. I would come from school early and I'll just play 4 to 6 p.m., on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then I started coming down again and trying to get more people to come down with me, like on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And then we were like, okay, this still isn't enough, because the time frame of when I'm graduating and from now and when I graduate, it was probably like a year or so left before I was about to graduate. And he said, we need to like triple the amount of hours that you're playing. And the only thing that I could think of is kind of like a homeschool type of situation, So when you look at the kids online who are playing like massive tournaments and all this stuff, is like they go to these academies where they're playing tennis or they're playing a sport for hours, and then they're only doing like schooling for like 3 or 4 hours a day. And so I was like, of course I can't skip school. So what do we do? And I think it was my mom who actually gave me the idea of, what if you take your double period sessions for math, English, and science, and you get those teachers to teach you on the weekends and you play tennis in those slots, because that would have been 2 hours for each of those sessions in the week. And of course, that was a great idea. I talked to my coach about it, and he was like, great, like we'll work on finding you another sponsor to, help to compensate like the people who are going to support you on the weekends and stuff like that, my same teachers. And by faith, with a strategy, we wrote a letter to the education department asking them if they would excuse me on the days that I had double period sessions, and I would still have to do the same hours, still take the same tests, still do all the classwork, but I will literally go to the school under a tree or because if it would be under a tree, just me and the teacher, or I'll be going to one of my professors' houses and doing it there. And I remember times like I would be falling asleep, like I'd be so tired, like because at this point I'm playing 40 hours of tennis a week, and I'm going to school every day basically. Even on the weekends, although it's not like a full 8 hours, every day I'm still like doing school. And so like a typical day for me would look like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to the gym at 4:30 in the morning, heading home, heading back to the tennis court for 7 o'clock drills to 10 o'clock, take a shower at the academy. One of my coaches would drop me to school for 10:30 in time for recess to be over, to then start school, finish at 3 p.m., go to the academy 4 to 6, come back Tuesday, do workouts again 4 to 5:30, 4:30 to 5:30, just about in the morning, and then doing tennis 1 p.m. to 6 p.m., hot blazing sun, shoes melting on the court, only me and the coach out there. So where you would have probably had 10 kids hitting 100 balls, it's one person hitting 100 balls and you out by yourself. And then of course there are moments where you ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Like is it really even possible for me to get a tennis scholarship? Like, am I even good enough? And I did. I actually got a tennis scholarship to the school that I wanted to go to, Clark Atlanta University, Atlanta, Georgia, historically Black college and university. And it was phenomenal. It was a private school, so that scholarship funding ended up being over $120,000. And then I went back and got my master's and got scholarship money again to become assistant tennis coach for the same team, which came with another, sponsorship amount. So it was a lot of, it was just a lot of like resilience, a lot of compounded interest with who I've been becoming the whole time along the way. And needless to say, I was still doing track. I was still doing music. I was still going to church all the days that my mama made me go to church. Like even with the SATs, I bought a book and I failed math in high school. I got a 4 in math.
Okay.
And I was so like anxious about how am I going to pass the SATs? Like I don't have an SAT class, none of that. And I remember buying the book and I would study before I worked out. I would study during the day. I would study when I got home after school. And when I got the test, when I went to take the test, I literally got the exact number that I needed to get into school.
Wow. That's incredible. And it just really speaks to your ability to, have a clear vision, making it plain, and just timelessly pursuing it. But the crazy thing about this whole story is obviously you went through all of that. You got the scholarship, you went to the private school, Clark Atlanta University, you got your master's, etc. But then when it was time to get your first job out of college, your visa was also running out and you found yourself working as a program assistant, earning only $7.50 per hour. Tell me, what was going through your mind during that challenging period? Because obviously coming from such a high, and not even just a high, from going through all of that you just been through, that time, that effort, that dedication, that determination, to only be earning $7.50 an hour. What was that like for you?
So first of all, I was like, you telling me that I did all of that to not make 6 figures? You telling me I got a 4.0 GPA to not land like the best job in the United States of America? But here's the thing. When I graduated with my master's degree, it was difficult to get a job being on I think it's like a H-1B visa, HB1, something like that. It was difficult trying to find a job no matter where I applied and all this different type of stuff. And I remember that one of my classmates, he ended up having a after-school program company with his parents. Now, the starting pay would have been $750 because I've never been in childcare, and I've never had like that experience of working with kids at that level. So basically the way that it works in the US is that you have to have different levels of certification, or to get paid different levels. So thankfully, because I had a master's degree in policy, they were able to bump me up to $12 an hour. But when I applied, I was like $750, like they take taxes out of this, like.
It just shows you that it just speaks to your drive and just your ambition and just you in general, because most people would have settled for that 750.
Right.
But there were you thinking, no, this is not me. Like, this ain't
like me. we gotta strategize this, and when I looked at
figure it out.
Listen, like when I looked at the paper, like it showed you like the pay grades, and I'm looking like, okay, how do I do this? How do I do this? Because I can't stay. This is not my portion. Okay, the Lord has told me that the land of milk and honey, and this ain't it, right? And so I saw the other options to make more. It was like $12, $14. Then I think it was like $21, and I was like, all right, how long is it gonna take me to get here? Like, what do I need to do to get here? And I remembered that if it's one thing that I definitely cultivated was a spirit of service and a spirit of excellence and humility. And it was literally coming in, putting your best foot forward, serving well. And within 30 days, I got a promotion to the assistant director position.
So I think
that was making like, I think $20 an hour, I believe it was. Yeah.
Wow.
30 days.
That's incredible. So literally, guys, you see, if you really have that tenacity and drive, you can turn a bad situation into a good situation in 30 days. But guys, just before we continue to the next segment of this fantastic conversation, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. A big shout out to everybody who has sat through this conversation with us so far. And if you're just joining the show now, you are tuned in to the WOW Show with your girl, Vernaire Bass. We're going live on 664 Connect Media today and also on Radio Anguilla. If you have been tuned in, you know that I'm sitting down with the beautiful Avern Richardson, a beautiful Anguillian lady. And she has just been filling me in on her transition from being a professional tennis player to entering the workforce. So Avern, you entered the workforce. Within 30 days, you went from being program assistant to assistant director. And of course, the ops, the devil, or whoever you may want it to be, decided that life was going a little bit too smooth for you, because then, and I think like most of the world, COVID-19 hit us out of the blue,
March,
and suddenly you found that you were out of a job. So after living in Atlanta for like 7.5 years, you decided that you were going to move back to Anguilla within 5 days. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so what actually happened, my grandmother passed away earlier 2020. I think it was in January she passed away. And so we had the funeral in March. And literally when I got, I think the funeral was in February and then it went until March. So by the time I got back to the US, the next day I was supposed to go back to work, they called and closed the school because of COVID.
Oh gosh.
So I had just left from Anguilla for the funeral, got back, going back to work the next day. School's closed, COVID. When is school gonna open? We don't know. And it was that moment that everything just shifted. And that in and of itself was quite a trying time, because I'm on a visa. And because the school is an after-school program, it's a private program. If you don't got school, then the school ain't getting paid, And so it's like, all right, well, it ain't like they still gonna be able to pay us and stuff like that. And I remember going through such a tough time, like trying to get like unemployment and what's not because of my visa status. And God was so gracious and amazing and always providing. He made a way for them to be able to support me. And it was actually the most money that I've ever made with even working there in the span
Okay.
of April, May, June. In 3 months, I made more money than I made the first, 3 or 4 months. Thank God. But my visa was running out. And so actually, they were actually in the process of working on sponsoring my visa. And so with COVID happening, like you couldn't really do anything because you don't even know if the school is still gonna be. We didn't know if the world was ever gonna recover. We didn't know if after school was ever gonna be a thing again. Like we didn't even know it was gonna have school like normal anymore. And so it was just a thing that got put on the back burner, like, it wasn't gonna happen. And then my visa was expiring in September. But with COVID, Delta only was showing flights like in the month of August, and Delta only had 3 flights in the whole month
Wow.
to St. Martin. And I remember like in May trying to decide like what am I gonna do? Like, should I go home now? Like, should I wait until September and see what happens? But I didn't want to risk my visa status because it's like, they might not have leniency for you if you overstay, regardless of whatever your reasoning was. And I remember like just being really upset with God because I went through so much. I worked so hard. Like I sacrificed a lot. I went through a lot. And I'm like, God, like, what did I do to deserve this? Like, I worked so hard in school to, not even be able to get a job I believe I deserve, or, get a pay that I thought that, I'll be working to achieve and stuff like that. And not to say that I love the place that I work for. Like, it's a phenomenal place, and I would even go back there and work again because the people are amazing. But as far as like the goal and the vision that I have for my life, I was like, this does not look like what I strategize for, right? And so at this point, I'm like, God, like 7.5 years later, you're about to take me back to a place where, it wasn't like the best social environment as far as like just a lot of toxic stuff, like just going back to a lot of the things that you thought you left behind. Now you're facing the reality that you got to go back and face, or you have to like figure out how to work through it, or how to, it's like I became a woman in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have to figure out where do I fit in, you know? And I remember just like waiting and praying. I'm like, okay, God, like, do I go now? Do I go now? And trying to see the prices for Delta. It was ridiculous. Just to get on a flight, almost like $1,000. Like, it was just crazy. And I remember taking like 5 COVID tests, like when you had to push the swab all the way up your nose. I was going to
Mm-hmm.
take a test like every day because you didn't know when you were going to get the results back, and you needed a test to get on the flight. And so I remembered like taking the test and just like praying that I don't get sick like the next day or something, because then I'll be stuck. And so it was just a really traumatic experience of like having to pack up, like, okay, what do I do with my stuff? Like my accounts, like, like what do I do? Do I put in a storage unit? Like, do I store it in the trash? I mean, I can't really sell it. Like, I don't have enough time. And, I was just like, God, if you're going to take me back home, you gave me this vision that I'm going to do this, this, and this. And if you're really the God that you say you are, then you can't let me fail. So at this point, I'm going back home and I'm putting the pressure on you to show up for me, because I know what you told me about my life, and this ain't look like it. And yeah, in 5 days, I booked a ticket and I was on a plane August 9th, 2020, crying my eyes out, going back home with a plate of Waffle House and Delta Comfort.
Wow. And then on top of that, you go back, you get a job, And unfortunately, you were fired from that job.
Fired in
So,
4 months.
so what would you? So again, not even what would you say, but what was your conversation with God in that moment?
You just gonna embarrass me like this? Like, okay, now tell me, Lord. Like, tell me, what did I do to deserve this right here? But I think like God, you know how people say, "Oh, God knows how much we can handle. He won't give us more than we can bear." And I believe that God truly knows who He can give certain struggles and battles to, because in the midst of all of this, I feel like I can relate a lot to the psalmist David in the Bible, because he would cuss God until God, why you forsake me? Like, da, 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 da. And then he would turn around and say, Lord, thank you, bless me, enlarge my territory. Like, you were great. He was in one way, like, express to God his frustrations, but then turn around and just still give him praise and thanks for how good he's been. And so I feel like there was some sort of grooming, pruning, maturing, something God was doing in me because of the destiny that He has for my life. And that emotional intelligence that was being built throughout all of this, to not, you know, blame people, to not become, well, not just become depressed, because I had got depressed at one point, but to not stay depressed, or to not like give up on my dreams fully, like, to not just go straight left, right? And become somebody that is far to come back center. And so I really struggled in the beginning, because I felt like, God, like, if it's something that I done, like, tell me so I can fix it. Like, I don't know what else. Like, from a child, this happened with my parents, then all the things that happened in between. And then, I try to stay focused. I try to stay disciplined. I try to put my best foot forward. And, it was just like, okay, all right. And funny thing, I found that, a lot of times when God has when God wants something from you, He would get it from you, right? And I never wanted to be an entrepreneur, because I was fearful of the life that an entrepreneur would have to live, and, in terms of money and stuff like that. And God was like, well, if you're not going to choose my will, I'm going to push you into it. And that was my push into entrepreneurship after being fired.
Mm-hmm. And that's the crazy thing, because I remember you said you came home and you told your mom, and your mom's like, "Great, now you can make make my business $1 million business." But I'm just conscious of time, so we're gonna speed things up a little bit. But like you said, you are a reluctant entrepreneur, and obviously, that was God's vision for you. So even though it wasn't your original plan, can you tell us a little bit about your business? How you came up with the idea for the strategic encounters agency,
Yeah.
and why you've also placed the same God who you felt wasn't, like, meeting you along the way. Why have you decided to place him at the center of your business?
So strategic encounter agency, in the beginning, I didn't know like what it really was, because I called it C-suite, like the executive C-suite, like letter C, SUITE. And it was only through like time of spending time with God was like, no, the C that I was telling you about, like, no, it's really spelled like SEA. And I got that revelation at the beach, and I was like, okay, well, what does SEA mean? Right. And I remembered looking back on my life, and in my study of the word, God, I saw like how God allowed people in the Bible to have like strategic moments where they had an encounter with God that changed their lives. Saul to Paul, Rahab, Moses, Daniel, the three Hebrew boys, right? And I was like, oh, wait, strategic encounter. Because I realized that whenever people encountered me, I had a great impact on their lives. And that is what I wanted to bring into my business. And I was a very savvy planner, professional operations person. And so I wanted to bring the C-suite level of excellence to the entrepreneurship world. And I was like, I want to have an agency because I want to have education resources. I want to have, planning. I want to have consulting. I want to have a podcast. I want to have books. So let's make it an agency. And I call it Strategic Encounter Agency. And now I've realized that in the midst of it all, God took me back to Anguilla because he knew my potential. And he knew that I was going to have everything at my fingertips to become whatever I dreamt in my mind. And with that, he knew that he wanted me for a specific purpose, and he had to root in me some kingdom principles that I can operate on in the marketplace versus operating in my own ambition. And in that 3 years, it felt like the wilderness. I was by myself. I was home all the time. Like, people would see me out and they would ask me, like, did you just move here? Like, they didn't even like men, women, people who I know, like, they were like, oh my gosh, like, you here? That's how much I either stayed at home, stayed by myself, or didn't like mix and mingle with people a lot. And I knew that God was doing something through me. So through prayer, through fasting, through studying, I knew that there's always a bigger plan because God was always with me. And I knew that this time I wasn't brought back home just to be brought back home. I was brought back home to be equipped, to be prepared, and now to be sent out, because I believe that when God felt like I was ready, he gave me a husband who was my friend from college, in the essence that we had our first encounter. He's from Anguilla too, Avern Richardson. We had our first encounter on the phone, going through some relationship issues that he was going through, and I was actually giving him life coaching advice about how to deal with the relationship. And apparently he knew that he liked me, but he never communicated that. And he told me in 2019 that he had a vision on that call of us building businesses together, but he never told me until we started dating in 2023 of March, which was a whole nother story in and of itself, because that came through me going through a series of prayer and fasting, because I didn't believe that marriage was possible for me. I didn't feel like I could trust a man. Like, I just, I was just like, I don't want to be like being Mary Jane or something like that. I think that's fine. And no, God was like, I have plans for you. And I knew that I had to become God's bride first to learn what it meant from God's perspective to be married and to be a bride before I even thought about wanting to be somebody else's bride. So that period for me of moving back home was really God, like, just pruning me, preparing me, cleansing me, just like deepening my understanding and my knowledge in his word and his principles. And now today, like, I believe that I am a purpose troubleshooter. Like, I believe that I am a disciple builder. Like, I believe that, I'm a operational system strategist for life and for business, because going back to that multi-trait, activity that we talked about in the beginning, like, not only has God given me the intellect and the experience and the exposure to do business well and to think creatively and analytically, but he's also given me the experience, the tools, the strategies that I can help other women push through and really dominate on purpose. Like, so that is.
So I think it's obvious why you also have a podcast called the Purpose Troubleshooter podcast, but I think we should definitely give you a plug here. So what is the message that you're really trying to convey to your listeners on the Purpose Troubleshooter podcast?
So on the Purpose Troubleshooter podcast, or even on my YouTube channel, Disciples of Dominion, the goal is to build dominant marketplace leaders. And the world has enough people who are selfishly ambitious, who are doing their own thing. But in terms of doing business God's way and taking up space with the right attributes, characteristics, and principles, and really representing God in every aspect of life, dominion is the message that I bring, and not dominion in the sense of we think, oh, you're controlling, you're not submissive, you're aggressive. That is culture's definition of dominion. But dominion was actually first mentioned in Genesis 1:28, where God said to create, multiply, subdue, and dominate. So we have a mandate to do all of those things. And dominion just means to know who you are, know the value that you have, and not value in yourself. It means that you know the word, you know the authority that God has given you, you know the purpose that he's given you, you know the mission that he's given you, and you have that power to boldly walk out what he has said. So my goal is to equip and to develop disciples of dominion, which are people who are going into the world like God has commissioned to, and not just be these hyper spiritual people, but really just take up space and spreading the glory of God and the message of God in everything that we do, with grace, with professionalism, with excellence, with beauty. Because hey, being a Christian and loving God is not boring. I don't know, who told y'all that, but I'm living a fabulous life. Enjoying God and enjoying life too. So yeah.
So on that note, Miss Fabulous, one of the questions that I ask everybody on the WOW Show is, can you share with us that wow moment in your life, that defining moment that you knew that what you're doing was what you were destined to do, that you were living a life of purpose now?
I think that there are a lot of moments that I could definitely go back to and be like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy. Wow. But today, my mom actually launched her political campaign. And just to be with her, alongside her, another milestone, and to see like how far I've come, and to see the fact that she, relies on me and believes in me to support her along her life's journey, and all the things that's kind of happening, culminating all at once in this current moment. Today, I literally broke down and just started crying, because I was like, God, like everything that you have taken me through was preparing me to, at every step of the way, lead in a way that brings transformation, that brings support, that brings liberation, and that furthers the message of your kingdom in one way, form, or fashion. So now, even being able to move in the political realm and support her in that, like, I was just like, God, like, this is just wow, like it's crazy, because you think that the strength, the resilience, the truth, the forgiveness, the surrender, the sacrifice, that all these things were kind of like just in vain. But being able to stand by her now at 50 years old, going after her dreams, regardless of all that she's been through, and really still having courage and vision and the audacity to step into such a, I guess I could say, a chaotic arena, and stand boldly on the truth of God, and having me to support her in that, it's definitely a wow moment for me.
Fantastic. And of course, if you could recommend a guest to be on the WOW Show, who would it be and why?
Of course, I would recommend my mother.
I had a feeling that you might say your mom, actually.
It was a hard decision, because I have another one that I will also recommend.
You can recommend her as well. The more the merrier. Fabulous women on the WOW Show are always welcome.
For sure. So I think that two women that I would recommend are my mother, Avanella Griffith, and Susan Best. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she sings. She is a Christian psalmist as well. And I believe that both of them, they have powerful stories of triumph, of victory, of tribulation, of, God's faithfulness as well, that really displayed like, wow, like you were still able to raise a person like me, and although I had my share of mistakes, I think I still did pretty well.
I think that you've done a fantastic job, and it just makes me go, wow, because I'm so happy and grateful to know you. So thank you so much for your suggestions, and thank you so much for being so open and so vulnerable throughout this conversation. Sometimes I wish that we had more than an hour, guys, but we only have an hour, and timing is very tight on a radio show. So guys, if you have been enjoying WOW, if you've been wowed by Mrs. Avern Richardson's story, I hope that you continue to tune in with us every Sunday here on Radio Anguilla and 664 Connect Media. Next week, I will be sitting down with another beautiful Anguillian lady, the fabulous style coach and personal stylist, Mistress Charla Hobson, and she'll be sharing her journey from being one of Anguilla's youngest fashion designers to revamping the wardrobes of women across the globe. So set your alarms and join us next Sunday and every Sunday after that at 4:30 p.m. on 664 Connect Media on Facebook and YouTube, or tune in to Radio Anguilla 95.5 FM. The show would also be rebroadcasted on Wednesdays at 4:30 p.m. on ZJB Radio 88.3 FM. So I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Radio ZJB for that opportunity as well. But guys, until next week, I hope that you all have a fantastic and a wow week. Bye.
Bye.